Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Jeanette.
Hi, I'm Jeanette, an alcoholic. Just got really nervous. My friend Miriam going, "Are you nervous? Are you going to throw up?" I don't know. I have a little gasp, but I don't really think I'm going to throw up. Thank you, Jack, for asking me to share. Happy birthday to everybody. It's really hard to follow what Vince just said because that's kind of how it's worked for me in the program. And the days that I'm really crazy, I've come here into other rooms, and it's been the people that have really touched my life and brought a higher power into my life and helped me not drink one day at a time. For the last 6+ years, and many of those people are here tonight. So you all know my story, so that, people who know me, so it's going to be kind of boring. I think my story's boring because, I don't know, it's insanity. You know it. You know what it is. It's chapter 3, it's not me, it's the tequila. It's not me, it's the tequila and the beer. It's not me, it's the beer and the cocaine. It's not me, it's the cocaine and the tequila. And, it's just switching everything. And I drank and I used for 24 years, whatever, from the time I was like 11 until I was 34. And I drank and used like chapter 3, basically. I always was trying to get that perfect combination. Every once in a while I'd hit it, things would be good, And, but most of the time, it was waking up with that, I'll never do that again, that solemn oath. I'll never do that again. I'll never drink again. Swearing off with or without a solemn oath. For years and years and years. And the bottom line for me is what I've discovered since I've gotten sober is, the reason that I drank was, as the big book states, I drank because I liked the effect that alcohol gave me for the most part. It says men and women drink because they like the effect produced by alcohol, and I did, because without alcohol I was a very fearful, shy, introverted person. And I don't know really where that came from, in the sense that I came from, a loving family. My parents loved me. My sister is always telling me how much, how cute I was when I was little, and she just loved to pick me up and carry me around. There was a lot of love. There's a lot of insanity in there too, but there was a lot of love, and I had no reason to be so fearful, really. But I was a really fearful kid and really shy, and really introverted for a long time. And when I discovered alcohol and drugs, I was able to kind of step out of that, and become what I thought you guys wanted me to be, the people in my school or whatever, my friends in high school or junior high school or whatever. How long do I speak to?
10:30.
5 to 10 after? Okay. 10:30. Thanks, Joe. So anyway, that's kind of like how, I drank and used, and, got through junior high school and some college and blah, 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 and it's really boring. And I grew up in Long Island. I lived in Manhattan for a number of years. When I first came in here, when I first moved to California, I would tell you that I was from Manhattan, because it had some sort of status thing for me, but, I don't know where that came from. The reality is I grew up in Long Island, in New Jersey, and, and I lived in Manhattan off and on for a number of years. And that was the whole thing. Like, my parents would say they would never write my address down in pen because I would move, like, every 6 months. I was constantly moving to a new environment, a new apartment, a new roommate, a new something, because, it was them. It was their problem. Something was wrong, I had a roommate one time tell me that I gave her an ulcer. because I was just so insane in my behavior and the coming and going, and I just never thought that my behavior affected other people. I just couldn't see it, you know, when I was out there. And I created a life that allowed me to drink the way that I wanted to, because I got into a business where at the end of the day there would be like 2 cases of beer on the truck to kind of reward you after your 12-hour day. And so it was great. I was like, oh, I found my people, you know, because everyone would hang out and drink beer. And in New York, you know, you could drink all you wanted, and I didn't have to deal with the drinking and driving thing that a lot of people in LA do, because I just, you know, get in a subway, hail a cab, or I'd walk, or, you know, or whatever. So so it was great. I was living in the city, and I'd created this world with people who drank the way that I did for the most part. The thing is that most of them would go home and, you know, at some point stop drinking, and I would always be like the one to close the bar, want to go to the after-hours party, or find the drugs, or whatever it was that I thought was going to change something in my life, or fix me that day, or whatever. Try to get back to that feeling, you know. Let's see. This went on for a number of years. I moved out here in 1991 because well, I would have said at the time I moved out here because of my career, you know, because of the business that I was in. There was more of my career here than on the East Coast, which was true. And but the reality is I needed to get away from there was a lot of insanity going on in my family. Literally, my sister had a nervous breakdown. My oldest brother is a heroin methadone addict. My other brother is a crackhead. There was just a lot of insanity happening around me, and I had no coping skills because, as I said, from the time I was about 11 years old, my only coping skills was to drink and to use. And so, you know, at that point, I could no longer, like, participate in my family anymore. And so my solution was to move as far away from them as possible. And they really had no idea about my drinking because it was kind of like I was the alcoholic with the secret life. You know, I'd show up at my mom's house, you know, a couple times a month with my duffel bag full of dirty laundry, you know, and or my dad once every couple months, and, you know, see them, and everything was cool, and, you know, whatever. And then I'd leave, and they wouldn't see me. They had no idea what was going on in my life, and I never told them. You know, I mean, how's everything? Everything's fine. Everything's good. You know, and you know, as long as I was kind of keeping it together for them, I think it was you know, they you know, how are they going to know if you don't tell them? You know what I mean? So I moved out here to kind of get away from the family thing and to start a new career. And I spent the first 3 months of my my life here sitting in my backyard. I moved down to Redondo Beach. I knew like 4 people here, one of whom was in Africa at the time. So I had my roommate and my 2 roommates and a friend of theirs. And so they all had jobs, and I didn't have a job yet. So I would, you know, get up in the morning, and the sun would be out, and I would, like, lay out in the sun, and then I'd be like, oh, you know, and I'd start to drink around, like, 10 or 11, you know, because it was almost noon, you know, because I had all these rules, you know what I mean? I loved to drink in the morning. I drank in the morning in the past. I loved it, but I kind of knew that was a problem. You know, so, you know, so like, but 11 is not really the morning, you know, it's almost the afternoon, and it is the day, you know, it's beer, it's not like it's booze, right? So I'd start to drink, and, you know, so I would drink this 6-pack or whatever was in the house, and I would, you know, pass out, and then, you know, or as I said, took a nap, but I, you know, really just drink until I passed out, get up, take a shower, kind of pull it together, go to the Lucky's, buy whatever I drank, replace it, bring it back and put it there, take the empty bottles and, you know, get rid of them. So my roommates would be like, hey, they come home, hey, let's have a beer, you know, and I could just start again, you know, and they didn't know, you know, or I think they didn't know. I have no idea actually what they knew because they were quite crazy too. But, you know, they didn't know what I've been doing all day. And I did this for several months when I first moved out here. And I thought, well, this is a great life. You know, I was collecting unemployment from New York, you know, in California. It was all good. You know, I had the whole thing going. And when I say my roommates were crazy too, I had the habit of surrounding myself with people who were just as crazy, or if not crazier than me, because usually a little crazier than me, because then I could judge them, you see, and then I wouldn't have to look at myself and my behavior because, you know, here's my crazy friend, and at least I'm not as bad as they are, you know. And what happened is I met a few people. A few moments of clarity occurred, before I got drunk, and I met a few people who were normal, You know, they weren't alcoholic. They weren't as, you know, they were just kind of like regular people, I guess. I don't really, you know, whatever. And I had this one friend, and I remember he didn't like drink to get drunk, and I didn't understand that. You know, like he would have like a party, and I'd be like, oh my God, the party's at your house. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to drive. Why don't you just get blotto? I mean, that's what you should do. You're home. And he would be like, well, I don't really drink like that. And I just thought he was the weirdest person, because I'd never really met anybody like that. I mean, everybody that I knew drank the way that I did, you know, or whatever, and then, you know, if they didn't, then I kind of just phased them out of my life, because I couldn't really be with somebody who didn't drink the way that I did, or at least have some sort of understanding. So there, you know, so there was a little moment of clarity, because that, you know, because that was the first time I'd ever really met anybody who was able to live like that. And he also, he had like a spiritual life. You know, he was very religious, and he was a young guy, and in a really unspiritual business that where, and he had would make decisions based on his morality and what was important to him, as opposed to just saying yes to things. It was really, he really is still quite an incredible person, and is still a friend of mine. But I couldn't really spend a lot of time with him because he didn't party the way that I did. So I met somebody who, you know, drank and used the way that I did, and that was great, because then went on the great relationship of 3.5 years of, you know, drinking and trying to maintain the outside stuff, you know, and it's actually, you know what, it was probably the hardest relationship I've ever had, because I got my heart broken, but I'll tell you, if it didn't happen, I wouldn't be in this room right now, and I wouldn't be sober today. So I am incredibly grateful that I had that relationship, and that I'm here today, and I'm sober, and I wouldn't trade any of it, you know. He had a worse problem than I did, and had to go into a rehab, and at that time, you know, like renting a house and maintaining, and, you know, both of us working a freelance lifestyle, which allowed us to drink and use the way we wanted to, and still go to work. And when he went into rehab, I suddenly, you know, was kind of all of a sudden, like, everything fell down. You know, the little glass house kind of just went poof and fell down. And a friend of his who was helping him go into a program said, I don't know, you know, if you're an alcoholic, I don't know what your problem is, but you need to go to a meeting. Click, you know, it was one of those. I was like, okay. And I lived up the street, and I came to the Marina Center, and I walked in. It was a noon meeting, and 6 years ago, the noon meetings were not packed the way they are now. I mean, it was pretty empty. It was like, you know, and the lights were off, and it was kind of, you know, and it wasn't nearly as bright and chipper as you see today. Not as bad as the stories I've heard, but not quite as nice as it is now. Somewhere in between. And you know, and I came in here, and I don't really remember a lot, you know, because like any good alcoholic, the night that he went into rehab, I stayed home and just drank myself, you know, to sleep. And I came in here with my sunglasses on, and I don't really remember much except that people wanted to touch me, which I did not want to have happen. And I remember saying the Lord's Prayer, and, you know, I hadn't said that since I was a kid. Oh yeah, you know, I was raised a Catholic a little bit for a while, and then we kind of dropped out of that. And then for a while I was a Baptist, you know, and I was around, right around 12 or so, before I really started getting into my alcoholic life. And I'll say this too, because I think part of what happens with us is that, you know, there's a reason they call it wine and spirits, you know. I mean, I've always been searching for something, you know. I've always been searching for something, you know. And so when like the Catholic and the Baptist stuff didn't work out, I found something, you know, and it worked for a long time, you know. So I remember the Lord's Prayer, and it kind of struck a chord, and kind of went, you know, back and forth and in and out. I started going to Al-Anon, because this place really didn't work for me, because my problem was him, because once again, it's not me, it's him. You know, it's you, it's somebody else. And the Al-Anon sponsor I had at the time, and I go to these Al-Anon meetings, and then I go home and I get drunk. You know, it just didn't work. You know, it just wasn't working. I wasn't happy. I wasn't getting any better. You know, and this really patient woman said to me, she goes, you know, you just need to, like, start looking in the mirror. You know, she didn't say you're an alcoholic. She didn't say she just said you need to start looking in the mirror. You need to start focusing on yourself. And when I did that, I was able to see my own insanity in my life, and just see how crazy I was. And I started going to an AA Al-Anon meeting, which I think is now at the West Side Alano Club, which was really great. And what happened is I started to relate more and more to the alcoholics than I did to the Al-Anon people. I didn't quite get the whole Al-Anon thing. And I started to relate and understand the disease of alcoholism. And after a few months of kind of like getting 2 weeks, and then, you know, going out and getting to, you know, I finally got sober after about 3 months. And what happened is, I did my last like little night of drinking, and I woke up the next morning, and I'd asked people for help before. I'd asked for rides to meetings, and but I didn't really care. I didn't really, 'cause I was really afraid of you, and without alcohol to kind of buffer me, I didn't really believe that anybody wanted to help me. First of all, I didn't really trust anyone here, and but I had gone to a meeting on Sunday night, and at the Sundowners Club, and these two women had come up to me and thrown their phone numbers at me, as I like to recall. My memory is them running across the room in slow motion and like handing me their phone numbers, and me just being like, oh, yeah. And I called one of them actually, and that was Sunday, and I drank whatever Monday or Tuesday, and I called one of them Wednesday morning, and she happened to have a woman's stag at her house, and I think she had 7 years of sobriety at the time. Her name was Iris, and she said, come to the meeting. So I went to the meeting, and it's a participation meeting, and everyone's sharing, and there are all these women, they're all about 22 years old, and they're all sharing. I don't even know what they were sharing about, but I just fucking hated every single one of them. I was just like, I've been drinking longer than you've been alive, okay? I don't even want, I just didn't understand what they were doing there. For me, at that time, I didn't get it. Because when I was 22 in New York, alcoholics were the guys with like half a foot in a trench coat down on the Lower East Side. Alcoholics weren't 22-year-old women or men, or younger, so I didn't understand it, because I had never experienced it before. I didn't get it. And so I had a lot of anger and resentment towards them, and they were really great, because what they did is they allowed me to voice my anger, and they were great. They loved me anyway, and come back, and please come back, and what we say, keep coming back, it'll be okay, and through there, started my journey into sobriety, and I'll tell you, it's been a great ride. Today was a really incredible day, because today I was just pissed off. I was really, really pissed off, because I spent the whole week with myself. Doing a lot of self-talk. There's a great movie. It's called The 7-Year Itch. Have you ever seen it? It's a great film. I don't know who wrote it, but whoever wrote it's an alcoholic, because the whole time the guy's doing a monologue with himself. And he's like, and I get that. I was watching it the other morning going, oh, my God. I get that, where you're talking about, well, this is going to happen, then I'll say this, and then they'll say that, and then this will happen, right? And it goes on and on and on. And I was doing a lot of that this week. And, oh, man, I was just crazy, But the difference is, for me, in the last 6 years, now when that starts to happen, I start to recognize it, and I have tools. I go to a meeting, I call my sponsor. The other thing is I'm in the middle of working my steps again, and I was coming up on doing an 8-step list that might have had something to do with it, kind of not really wanting to deal with that. I've had to been, looking at some of my deeper defects of character lately, and which has not been, easy for me, because, I find that I lie by omission. I don't like lie to your face, but I just don't really tell you what's happening, and it's a hard thing at 6 years of sobriety to kind of have to look at this stuff. See, because before I had my little veil of alcohol. Now I don't have any of that. It's all there. All these defects I'm living with, and so it's been quite an interesting thing. And for me, when I was about, I'm going to jump ahead because I want to wrap it up in a few minutes. My first year of sobriety, I went to Europe at 90 days sober, and I had a bet with Steve R. He said, you won't stay sober, and I did. Kind of on a resentment. My friend sent me a chip in Germany. It was great. And then, a few months later, I got into a car accident in sobriety, which pissed me off. And then a few months later after that, but I didn't drink, right? A few months after that, the car was stolen, okay, from in front of my house, but I didn't drink. And then a little bit after that, then my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And then after that, 6 months later, he died of cancer about 5 days before my first birthday, And I had to, fly back to New Jersey, and it was all, big drama and stuff. And you know what? I mean, it was. I didn't have to drink over any of these things. I learned that I can show up and do things for people and be there and be of service. And it was really hard for me to be there because of the insanity in my family. But I was really grateful that I was sober that day, that I could be there for my dad had 2 more kids who were quite a bit younger than me, and so I could be there. They were 17 and 12 at the time when he died, and so I could be there for them and my stepmom and try to be of service to them and just kind of like take care of all the stuff that they didn't know how to deal with, it's been really great in since then, the years have kind of go up and down, they ebb and flow. Okay, it's not been, I'm not a pink cloud person. I didn't come in here happy. I'm not a happy person. I have some great days, some wonderful weeks, you know, and then I have some really shitty moments, you know, and yeah, you know, and it and when I was about 4 years sober, I kind of hit a wall because of you know, because I was having a real hard time with the God thing, you know. And for me, it had gotten to the point where it's like, you know, I was in a point that it's like either I'm going to drink, you know, I'm going to kill myself, you know, or I'm going to find a higher power, you know, because that's really what it gets down to for me when I get into that place so deep inside of myself that I can't step out, you know. And you know, I was able to come to find a higher power that works in my life for me, because I have a lot of information, a lot of ideas, and a lot of concepts, and yada yada yada. And you know, the thing is, what I was able to discover at that point is that my higher power works through you. You know, I mean, the bottom line is I witness miracles happening around me all the time when I decide to open my eyes and take that little, like, 5-6 inch, you know, there's that mask that you kind of go around, you only see those 5 or 6 inches around you. When I take that off and I go, oh my God. And I see these things happen, and I got to see the people who came in after me, and I watched them get sober, and I get to see friends in my life that I never would have imagined that I could possibly have, who show up for me regardless of my defects of character. So even if I don't call them for weeks or months or whatever, they still show up for me, and they have taught me how to find my higher power in my life, you know, and I get to bear witness to their higher power working in their life on a regular basis. Like I said, I've had an opportunity to work the steps a few times. I've had some great sponsors in my life who've taught me a lot of things. You know, I'm really grateful to be here today. I start to cry at the weirdest things lately. I swear to God, it just drives me crazy sometimes. One thing and I'll stop. I have a sun deck, I'm on the deck, I'm waiting for a friend of mine to come over. I have this butterfly that's hanging out on my deck, okay, and this thing is like circling me. And I know he wants to land on me, okay, because he keeps circling me, and he'll land, and I'll get a little closer to him, and he'll kind of think, and then he'll fly away, and he'll come, you know, and it's like this whole thing. And I'm going, my God, this is such an incredible, you know, and it sounds corny and whatever, you know, if you're cynical like me, it's really corny and hokey and all, but it's really cool, you know, that I have enough. You know, because there are times where I'll be sitting on my deck, and he will actually land on my hand. I will be so calm, I will be so still, and he'll actually land there and stay. You know, and that to me is an amazing thing. You know, that my life goes from, you know, sitting in the backyard drinking all day to sitting there maybe, you know, having a butterfly land on my hand for a few minutes. I think it's a pretty cool thing. Anyway, thanks for letting me share.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.